Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really important geopolitical shift, something that's definitely relevant if you're following international relations, and especially if you're prepping for UPSC exams. This has Maine's current events written all over it.
Absolutely.
We're diving into how the war in Ukraine is basically redrawing the map for arms supplies into the Central Asian republics.
That's right. These major conflicts, their effects spread much wider than you might think. And this arms situation in Central Asia, it's a classic example. So our goal today is pretty clear. Understand how the Ukraine war has hit Russia's role, their long-standing role, as the main arms dealer there. And crucially, who's moving into that space. We're drawing heavily on analysis from the Eurasian Times for this.
Okay, good. So let's set the scene first. Before Ukraine, Russia was the go-to arms supplier in Central Asia for decades, right?
Yeah.
How dominant were they really?
Oh, incredibly dominant. Almost total control, you could say. If you go back to the Soviet days, I mean, these republics were all part of one military system. And even after the USSR broke up, that connection, that dependency, it really stuck. Russia basically had a monopoly, a virtual monopoly, on supplying everything, guns, ammo, big military gear to places like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about history. It was, well, a major lever of their influence in the region.
A real cornerstone of their power there. Okay, so enter the Ukraine war. Obviously, it's shaken up a lot of things globally. This is where it gets really interesting for tracking current shifts. How did that conflict specifically affect Russia's ability to keep supplying those arms?
Well, the war in Ukraine put just immense pressure on Russia's own military and their defense industry. Their own forces needed everything they could get, understandably. That became the absolute top priority. And that naturally squeezed their ability to produce and export arms like they used to. I mean, we've even seen reports, right, about Russia having to look for military supplies elsewhere.
Yeah, Iran, North Korea.
Exactly. Which really tells you something about the strain they're under.
That's a very telling sign, yeah.
Yeah.
And this pressure, it directly led to a drop in their arms exports overall.
Absolutely. The Eurasian Times points this out, citing, I think, a South China Morning Post report. It mentioned a huge 64% drop in Russia's total arms exports between 2020 and 2024.
64%, wow.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, a good chunk of what they did export still went to India, China, and notably 11% to Kazakhstan. But the key thing for us here is that the war essentially forced Moscow to dramatically cut back its arms sales to the other Central Asian republics.
Which logically opens the door for someone else.
Precisely.
And it seems China was maybe particularly ready to step through that door. Why China?
Well, what's interesting is China already had a really strong economic presence in Central Asia.
Okay.
The Belt and Road Initiative. They'd been building trade links, infrastructure for years, really since the Soviet Union fell apart. But they'd mostly stayed out of the arms market there, probably, respecting Russia's traditional sphere. The Ukraine war basically gave Beijing a strategic moment, an opportunity to enter that market without really stepping on Moscow's toes too much, because Moscow was so preoccupied elsewhere.
So China saw its chance and took it. Can we get into some specifics? What are we actually seeing? Which countries are buying Chinese kit?
Yeah, the Eurasian Times provides some solid examples. Just this year, 2024, Kazakhstan reportedly bought Chinese-made drones. Uzbekistan has even bigger plans, apparently looking at acquiring Chinese JF-17 fighter jets.
JF-17s, right. Jointly made with Pakistan.
That's the one. They're multi-role, work in all weather, pretty versatile. And a key point, they're generally seen as more cost-effective than, say, Western options like the French Rafale.
And cost is always a factor, especially for...
Exactly. Especially for developing nations. Cost is often a huge consideration in these big procurement decisions.
Sure. So besides the fighter jets, what else is Uzbekistan getting from China? Any other weapon systems?
Yeah, Uzbekistan's also brought in new Chinese air defense systems. We're talking specifically about the FM-90 short-range missile system and also the KS-1C system. That one's quite capable range. It's about 5 to 50 kilometers. Can intercept targets up to 25 kilometers high. It's a real upgrade for their air defenses. Plus, there are reports suggesting Uzbekistan might already be using Chinese Wing-Lung military drones.
Okay, so that's quite a bit of Chinese tech flowing into Uzbekistan's military. What about other countries in the region? Turkmenistan, for instance.
Turkmenistan seems to be really deepening its defense ties with Beijing, too. Ashgabat is said to have bought the FT-2000, the FM-90, and the KS-1C, similar systems to Uzbekistan, which might suggest, a regional trend in air defense choices.
Interesting.
And beyond those, Turkmenistan is believed to have acquired even more advanced Chinese systems. Things like the HQ-9 long-range system.
Uh-huh.
Also the HQ-12 medium-range system. That one's notable because it was one of China's first with a phased array radar, which lets it track multiple targets at once. Pretty sophisticated stuff.
Right.
And the HQ-7 short-range system, often compared to the French Crotale.
So a whole suite of air defenses. Anything else?
Yeah, reports also mention things like advanced surveillance radars, the YLC-18 active phased array radar, plus tropospheric communication stations, electronic reconnaissance gear, and even attack drones like the WJ-600A and CH-3A. It really points towards Turkmenistan acquiring some quite high-tech capabilities from China.
Sounds like a pretty comprehensive upgrade across the board for Turkmenistan, relying heavily on Chinese tech. What about Tajikistan? We often hear it's maybe less developed economically.
That's generally true, but interestingly, even Tajikistan showed off a Chinese-made HQ-17 AE air defense system in a military parade recently. Now, this is a mobile system. It's designed to take out aircraft, helicopters, cruise missiles, drones, quite versatile.
Okay.
And being mobile makes it particularly useful for Tajikistan's very mountainous terrain. It addresses their specific security needs in challenging environments.
Right, makes sense. So looking across the region then, from Kazakhstan down to Uzbekistan, it seems like a really clear trend. Central Asian nations are increasingly turning to China for their military hardware needs.
It definitely looks that way.
What does this mean strategically? What are the bigger implications of this shift for the region and maybe for, global power dynamics?
Well, if you connect the dots, China sees Central Asia as absolutely vital. It's the core land bridge for the Belt and Road Initiative, linking East and West. So by stepping in as a major arms supplier, Beijing isn't just filling a void left by Russia. It's strategically deepening its influence in a region that's fundamental to its long-term goals, both economic and geopolitical. China's effectively taking on parts of the security role that Russia, because of Ukraine, just can't fully manage right now. And that definitely shifts the balance of power in Eurasia. This is a key dynamic for, say, UPSC aspirants to really grasp.
Okay, so let's quickly recap for everyone listening, especially those preparing for exams. We've seen Russia, the historically dominant arms supplier, facing serious constraints due to the Ukraine war. That's led to a big drop in its export capacity to Central Asia.
Right.
And China, already a big economic player there, has really seized this moment, becoming a key new arms provider. We see significant deals with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and even Tajikistan.
Exactly. And it's not just, a small change in who's selling what. This feels like a more fundamental shift in the region's security architecture. China's influence in this strategically vital area is clearly growing. Understanding that power shift is, well, it's essential for anyone studying IR or prepping for UPSC.
It really is. Which leads to a big question, something for you, the listener, to think about. What are the long-term effects of this increased Chinese military footprint in Central Asia? What does it mean for regional stability and for that broader balance of power in Eurasia? Definitely something to mull over, particularly for your UPSC mains analysis.
And if you do want to dig deeper into the specifics, the Eurasian Times, as we mentioned, is a really good source for ongoing reporting and analysis on this. We definitely recommend checking them out.
Absolutely. So if you found this deep dive useful, if it helped clarify things, especially in the context of UPSC prep or just understanding current affairs, please do hit like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Any questions, any further thoughts you have on this topic, we'd love to hear from you.